The sun on the alien world of Lyros set in long, purple lines across the sky as Ethan walked along the rocky path. He had been traveling for days, searching for shelter and a place to rest. His ship had crashed far from any human settlement, and the locals he met were cold or afraid of him. Everything around him felt strange, strange colors, strange wildlife, strange silence. But he kept going. He had survived worse before. As he climbed over a ridge of dark stones, he noticed something lying near a cluster of tall blue trees. At first, he thought it was another animal killed by the dangerous storms. But then he saw a small shape beside it, tiny, curled, shaking. He moved closer slowly, his boots crunching on the uneven ground. Then he froze. The larger shape was an alien woman, her skin a pale silver blue, her body still and lifeless. Beside her sat a little girl, no older than 5 or 6. She had the same silver blue skin, but her eyes were bright violet and filled with fear. Her small hands were clinging to her mother's arm, refusing to let go. Ethan felt his heart tighten. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide.
She didn't speak.
She only stared, trembling. Ethan knelt down a short distance away. He didn't want to frighten her more. The air smelled of dust and metal, signs of a recent attack. Something had happened here, something violent. "It's okay," he said softly, even though she probably didn't understand his words. "I won't hurt you." The girl made a tiny sound, a soft whimper like a wounded animal. Ethan looked at the alien woman again. There was no doubt she was gone. The girl had been here alone, maybe for hours, maybe longer. The cold wind pressed against her thin clothes. She wouldn't survive the night. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't know if it was right for a human to take an alien child. Maybe her people would blame him. Maybe they would accuse him of harming her. But he couldn't leave her there. Not like this. Not alone beside her mother's body. He slowly reached out his hand. The girl flinched, her arms tightening around her mother. Ethan lowered his hand again and gently pointed toward the mountains. He tried to show her he wanted to bring her somewhere safe. He pointed at himself, then at her, then to the sky where the stars would appear. The girl blinked, watching every movement. Finally, with trembling fingers, she let go of her mother's arm. She stood shakily on her feet and took one step toward him, then stopped. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked back at her mother, confused and lost. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered. "I'll come back. I promise." He gently lifted the girl into his arms. She was light, too light, as if she had not eaten for days. She didn't fight him, but she kept her face turned away, silent. The wind pushed harder now, carrying the distant sound of thunder. A storm was coming. They needed shelter fast. Ethan carried her toward an old cave he had passed earlier. The girl's small hands clutched his shirt, not out of trust, but out of fear of falling. Her body shivered from cold and shock. When they reached the cave, Ethan found a dry corner and set her down carefully. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, still watching him. "Food," he said gently, placing a small ration bar in front of her. He broke a piece off and ate it himself to show her it was safe. After a few seconds, she reached out and took the rest. Her movements were slow, cautious. She ate silently, her eyes never leaving him. As night fell, the wind outside howled like a living creature. Ethan gathered dried branches and used his emergency tool to start a small fire. Warm light filled the cave. The girl watched the flames with wide, fascinated eyes. Little by little, her breathing slowed. She was still scared, but the warmth helped. Ethan saw her eyelids droop. The exhaustion she had been holding back finally reached her. She curled up beside the fire, hugging her knees. He removed his jacket and gently draped it over her small body. For the first time that night, she looked up at him with something different in her eyes. Not trust, but not fear either. Something in between. Something fragile. Ethan smiled softly. "You're safe now," he whispered. Outside, the storm raged across the alien world. Lightning lit up the sky, and thunder rolled over the mountains. Inside the cave, Ethan sat awake, keeping watch over the little girl who had lost everything. She was an alien, yes, but she was also just a child. Alone, scared, and holding on to the last piece of hope she had found. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know if her people would accept him or blame him. He didn't know if he could keep her safe in this harsh world. But he knew one thing. He would try. Because in that moment, on a lonely alien world, a human stranger had become the girl's only hope. The storm finally passed in the early morning, leaving the world washed in cold mist. The cave entrance dripped with rainwater, and the air carried the soft scent of wet alien plants. Ethan had not slept at all. He sat near the entrance, watching the sky slowly grow brighter, listening to the soft breathing of the little alien girl wrapped in his jacket. She slept lightly, her small body curled like a frightened animal. Every few minutes she twitched, as if remembering the terror of yesterday. Ethan kept his eyes on her, not wanting to wake her but wanting to be sure she was still safe. When the girl finally stirred, she blinked slowly, unsure of where she was. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the jacket. Then she looked up and saw Ethan. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She only watched him with big, tired violet eyes. Ethan offered her a small smile. "You're okay," he said softly. "It's morning now." She didn't understand the words, but she understood his tone. She hugged the jacket closer, then looked toward the cave entrance. Ethan knew exactly what she was thinking. Her mother. The memory hit him again, her small trembling body beside the lifeless form, the silent grief in her eyes. He knew they had to go back. He had promised the night before. Ethan stood and gestured gently, pointing outside. "We should return," he said. "I'll keep my promise." The girl hesitated. She looked at the fire, at the jacket around her, at the strange human man. Then she slowly stood and took one step toward him. Ethan didn't rush her. He waited, letting her move at her own pace. When she reached him, she lifted her arms slightly, not to be picked up, but to show she was ready. He nodded and walked beside her as they left the cave. The ground outside was damp, small puddles reflecting the violet sky. The girl stepped carefully, her bare feet leaving light prints in the muddy soil. She stayed close to Ethan, but not too close, just close enough that she felt less alone. They walked in silence. The wind blew softly, carrying the distant cries of creatures waking after the storm. Ethan kept scanning the surroundings, making sure there were no threats. He remembered the scorch marks on the ground near the girl's mother. Something dangerous had been there, something violent, but he didn't know what. When they reached the ridge, the girl stopped. The body of her mother still lay beneath the blue trees, untouched except for the rain that had washed over her. The girl stared at her mother for a long time, her small shoulders shaking. Ethan knelt beside her, but did not touch her. This was her moment. The girl stepped forward on trembling legs. She approached her mother slowly, as if afraid she might wake up. She reached out a small hand and touched the woman's cold fingers. A soft sound left her throat, something between a sob and a broken whisper. Ethan looked away, giving her the little bit of privacy he could. He wished he could help her. He wished he could say something comforting. But even if they spoke the same language, what words could ease a pain like this? After a long time, the girl turned to him. Her face was wet with tears, but she didn't hide them. She looked at Ethan with a question in her eyes, a painful, innocent question. "Is she really gone?" Ethan nodded slowly, his heart heavy. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The girl flinched, as if the truth finally sank in. She pressed her forehead against her mother's arm one last time. Then, with trembling steps, she walked back to Ethan. She reached out and grabbed his hand. Ethan froze for a moment, surprised by the sudden trust. Her tiny fingers wrapped tightly around his, holding on as if she might fall if she let go. He squeezed back gently. "We'll take care of her," he said quietly. "We won't leave her here." The girl didn't understand the words, but she understood him. Her grip tightened. Ethan looked around for something to help. He found large leaves from the blue trees and laid them over the mother's body, forming a simple cover. He didn't know alien customs. He didn't know if he was doing it right, but he wanted to show respect. When he finished, he knelt beside the girl again. "We need to go," he said softly. The girl didn't move at first. She just stared at the covered body, her lips trembling. Then slowly she nodded. As they walked away, the girl stopped one last time and looked back. She lifted her small hand and made a gesture. 2 fingers pressed against her forehead, then extended outward. Ethan recognized it as a farewell sign. He quietly copied the gesture, hoping it meant something comforting. The girl looked up at him again. Something had changed in her eyes. The fear was still there, but now there was something else too. Something small but growing.
Trust.
Ethan picked her up gently.
She didn't resist.
She rested her head against his shoulder, tired from crying, tired from everything. As he carried her toward the mountains, Ethan realized something important. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. She needed him, and he needed to make sure he didn't fail her. The journey back to the cave was slow. The girl was exhausted, her small body heavy with grief. Ethan carried her carefully, making sure she felt supported. Each time her breathing hitched, he whispered soft sounds, not words she understood, but tones that told her she wasn't alone. By the time they returned to the cave, the sky had turned a deep shade of blue. Alien birds flew overhead in long spirals, calling to each other as they searched for food after the storm. The girl kept her head against Ethan's shoulder until he stepped inside and gently set her down near the fading fire. She didn't let go of his shirt until the very last second. Ethan knelt in front of her and offered her water from his canteen. She took it with both hands, her fingers trembling. She drank slowly, her eyes still red from crying. When she finished, she hugged the canteen to her chest as if afraid he might take it away.
He didn't.
Instead, he sat beside her, resting his tired back against the cave wall. He watched her quietly. She sat curled up in his jacket again, knees pulled to her chest. Every now and then she glanced at him, checking if he was still there. Ethan sighed. He hadn't planned for any of this. He had crashed on this planet with the hope of finding a settlement, maybe a way to contact the nearest human outpost. He had only planned to survive, not save a child. But now he couldn't imagine leaving her. As he stared at the fire, memories from his past rose like ghosts he had tried to forget. He saw another child in his mind, a little boy back on Earth. A boy he once cared for. A boy he failed to protect. Ethan closed his eyes. That memory still hurt more than any wound. The girl shifted beside him, drawing his attention back. She was watching him with wide violet eyes, unsure but curious. She pointed at his chest, then at herself, then tilted her head as if asking why. Why are you helping me? Ethan understood. He took a slow breath and tapped his chest gently. Because you needed someone, he said softly. She blinked, confused but listening. He didn't mean to speak his thoughts aloud, but the words came anyway, quiet and heavy. I failed someone once, he whispered. I won't fail again. The girl didn't know his language, but she could feel the sadness in his voice. Her small hand reached out and touched his arm gently, almost like she was offering comfort. Ethan smiled weakly. Thank you, he murmured. They stayed like that for a while, sitting in the dim warmth of the fire, 2 lost souls trying to understand each other without a shared language. Later, Ethan unpacked some supplies, another food bar, a blanket, and a small emergency lamp. The girl watched each item with careful eyes. She didn't seem afraid anymore, only uncertain. He broke the food bar in half and gave her the larger piece. She hesitated, looking between him and the bar. Then she tore off a small bit and handed it back to him. Ethan felt his throat tighten. She was sharing. Thank you, he said again, accepting it. They ate quietly. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the wind had calmed, and distant glowing insects drifted by the cave entrance like floating lights. Once she finished eating, the girl rubbed her eyes, clearly sleepy. Ethan spread the blanket on the ground and gestured for her to lie down. She obeyed slowly, still watching him. When he dimmed the lamp and sat a few steps away, her eyes widened in alarm. She reached toward him, a silent plea. Ethan moved closer, sitting within arm's reach, so she could see him clearly. Only then did she relax. She lay down on the blanket, pulling the jacket over herself. Her eyelids fluttered as she fought sleep. Finally, she whispered a soft sound, a word in her own language. It sounded like Lyra or Lyra. Ethan leaned closer. "Is that your name?" he asked gently. She whispered it again. "Lyra." Ethan smiled. "Lyra," he repeated softly. Her eyes softened. She closed them, finally giving in to sleep. Ethan sat beside her until her breathing became slow and steady. The firelight reflected off her silver-blue skin, making her look peaceful for the first time since he found her. He watched her for a long time. He wasn't her father. He wasn't even her species. But none of that mattered. She was a child who had lost everything in one night. A child who needed someone, anyone, willing to stand by her side. And Ethan had made a silent promise the moment she grabbed his hand. He would protect her. Not because it was his job. Not because he expected anything in return. But because he knew what it felt like to lose someone and have no one to turn to. Because he knew the pain of failing a child. And because this time he had a chance to make things right. As the night deepened and the fire slowly dimmed, Ethan whispered her name one more time. "Lyra, you're not alone now." He leaned back, eyes heavy, heart heavier, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a small spark of purpose.
He would keep her safe.
No matter what this alien world threw at them. Morning arrived quietly, with pale light slipping into the cave and touching the stone walls. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, feeling every ache in his back from sleeping on cold rock. But the moment he turned his head, the soreness didn't matter anymore. Lyra was still asleep beside him. She had moved closer during the night without him noticing. Her tiny hand rested against his arm, gripping the fabric of his sleeve as if she feared he might disappear if she let go. Ethan smiled softly. He gently slipped his arm out without waking her and stood up. The fire had gone out during the night. He needed more wood, water, and maybe something more filling than ration bars. They couldn't live off emergency supplies forever. He stepped outside the cave. The air was cool, and the ground still sparkled with dew from the storm. Strange purple birds hopped along the branches of the blue trees, chirping soft metallic notes. It was peaceful, too peaceful for a planet where something dangerous had killed Lyra's mother. Ethan didn't trust the silence. He scouted the area near the cave, gathering long sticks and dried leaves. A few minutes later, he found a shallow stream flowing through the rocks. The water glowed faintly, tinted by minerals, but after filtering it through his purifier, it tasted clear. He filled the canteen and made his way back. When he stepped into the cave again, he saw Lyra sitting upright on the blanket, rubbing her eyes. The moment she saw him, her panic hit first, her breath caught, her body stiffened, then her eyes softened. She scrambled to her feet and hurried toward him, not running, but moving fast enough that her small steps echoed lightly. Ethan lifted the canteen. "Water," he said gently. She took it with both hands and drank, spilling a little down her chin. Then she handed it back with a quiet, shy nod. He knelt to her level. "We should move," he said. "This cave won't be safe forever." She didn't understand the words, but she sensed his seriousness. She looked around the cave, then toward the forest, then back at him. Finally, she nodded again. But she didn't walk. She lifted her arms slightly, clearly asking to be carried. Ethan chuckled softly. "Well, okay." He picked her up, settling her against his chest. She rested her head near his shoulder, her small fingers curling into the fabric of his worn shirt. She felt so light, so fragile. He stepped out into the wilderness. Once more, they traveled through the quiet forest, guided by the gentle sound of flowing water. Lyra watched everything, the trees, the insects, the colorful plants, with wide, cautious eyes. But she always kept one hand on Ethan, making sure he didn't vanish. After an hour of walking, they found a small clearing where the light shone warm and bright. Ethan stopped by a fallen log, letting Lyra sit on it while he built a small fire. She watched him work, tilting her head each time a spark jumped. When the fire finally lit, she reached out her palm toward the heat, marveling at the warmth. Ethan smiled.
"See?
It's safe." She looked up at him and said a soft word, Short, musical, questioning. He pointed to the flames. Fire. She repeated it slowly. F-A-I-R. Ethan's eyes widened. You learn fast. She pressed a hand against her chest. Lyra. And I'm Ethan, he said, tapping his own chest. Then, she repeated, struggling with the human sounds. He gave her a thumbs up. She copied the gesture, her face lifting in a tiny smile. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. Later, Ethan dug through his pack and found a thermal blanket. He cut it into 2 pieces, one small enough for Lyra, one for himself. She watched him curiously as he wrapped the silver fabric around her shoulders. When he tied the last corner, she touched the blanket gently.
Soft. Warm.
Then, without warning, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. It was a gesture of her people, one he had seen the mother do in her final position. A gesture of trust or gratitude. Ethan froze for a moment, then placed a gentle hand on her head. You're welcome, he whispered. The day went on quietly. They stayed near the clearing, gathering food roots Lyra pointed out, plants she clearly recognized as safe. Ethan trusted her instincts. She trusted his strength. Together, they made a small temporary camp under the shade of wide leaves. As night fell, the alien stars emerged one by one, green, pink, and bright white scattered across the sky. The air grew cold again, and Ethan built another fire. Lyra sat very close to him, leaning against his side. Whenever a distant creature howled, she pressed tighter, her small hands clutching his arm. Don't worry, Ethan said softly. I'm here. She didn't understand the words, but she understood him. When she grew too tired to sit upright, she crawled onto his lap without hesitation and curled into a small ball beneath the blanket. Ethan held her carefully, keeping her warm. The first night they had spent together had been full of fear and grief. But this night felt different. Lyra wasn't clinging out of panic now. She was clinging because she felt safe. Ethan looked at the stars, the fire flickering beside him, and the little alien girl asleep in his arms. For the first time since his crash, he felt something like hope. The next day began quietly. A soft breeze brushed through the clearing, making the blue leaves shimmer like metal. Ethan woke to the feeling of something warm against his side. Lyra had slept curled up beside him again, her tiny hand gripping his sleeve. She opened her violet eyes slowly, blinking at the morning light. When she saw him awake, she relaxed, as if reassured that he hadn't disappeared in the night. Morning, Ethan said softly. She didn't understand the words, but she gave a small nod, her way of greeting him. Ethan stretched his sore arms, then stood to check the forest around them. He needed to find a safer place, maybe a hidden shelter or a local village where, if they were lucky, the people weren't hostile. But they weren't lucky. Not that day. As Ethan walked a few steps from the camp, Lyra suddenly stiffened. Her ears twitched, then she grabbed his pant leg and pointed toward the trees. Ethan listened carefully. Leaves rustled. Branches snapped. Someone or something was coming. He grabbed his small survival knife, the only weapon left after the crash. He stepped in front of Lyra, shielding her with his body. A figure emerged from the trees. Then another. And another. Within seconds, 4 aliens stepped into the clearing. Their skin was the same silver blue as Lyra's, but their armor was dark and their weapons glowing with energy. Their eyes locked on the child instantly. One of them spoke sharply in their language, a stream of words that sounded like commands. Lyra's face drained of color. She took a step backward, shivering. Ethan recognized the fear instantly. She knew them, and she feared them. The tallest alien pointed at her and barked something louder. 2 soldiers stepped forward to grab her. Ethan moved before he could think. He stood between them and the girl, knife in hand. One soldier halted in surprise. The other snarled and raised his weapon. Stop, Ethan said firmly, even though they didn't understand. You're not taking her. The tallest alien narrowed his eyes. He stepped forward and spoke again, slower this time, as if expecting Ethan to obey. But Ethan didn't move. He tightened his grip on the knife, planting his feet in the dirt. Lyra pressed her face into the back of his shirt, small fingers clutching the fabric in terror. Her breathing turned shaky and fast. Ethan could feel every tremble of her tiny body. The tallest alien hissed a final command. The two soldiers lunged. Ethan reacted instantly. He swung the knife in a wide arc, forcing one soldier to jump back. The other swung his glowing staff toward Ethan's ribs. Ethan dodged, feeling the heat of the weapon brush his side. The aliens hadn't expected resistance from a human. Ethan used that surprise. He kicked one soldier's leg out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. The second soldier swung the energy staff again. Ethan blocked it with his forearm, ignoring the sharp pain, then shoved him backward. But Ethan was only one man, and they were trained warriors. The tallest alien barked new orders. The remaining soldier stepped forward, raising a weapon that hummed with dangerous power. Ethan tightened his stance. He knew he couldn't win. He knew he might not survive. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't moving. Not while Lyra was behind him. "Come on," he whispered under his breath. "Try it." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Just as the soldier aimed the weapon, Lyra suddenly cried out, loud, sharp, and heartbreaking. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of defiance. The aliens froze. Ethan turned his head slightly. Lyra had stepped out from behind him, tears streaming down her face, but her jaw tight with determination. She shouted something in her own language, short but powerful. The words hit the soldiers like a shockwave. They looked at each other, confused and startled. Then Ethan understood. Lyra wasn't just a child. She was someone important, someone they were afraid to harm. But they still tried to grab her. One soldier reached forward. Ethan grabbed Lyra and pulled her back, stepping between her and the armored alien again. He glared at the soldier with a fierce warning in his eyes. The soldier hesitated, then lowered his weapon slightly. The tallest alien snarled something angry and swung his staff toward Ethan, but another alien soldier quickly stepped in front of him, blocking the blow. More arguing followed. Angry words between the aliens, pointing at Lyra, at Ethan, at the forest around them. Finally, the tallest alien spat on the ground, turned sharply, and gestured for the group to leave. One by one, they vanished into the trees. Lyra collapsed to her knees, crying softly. Ethan knelt beside her. Hey, it's all right," he whispered, even though his heart was racing. "They're gone." She threw her arms around him, gripping him like he was the last safe thing in the world. Ethan wrapped his arms around her carefully. "I won't let anyone take you," he said softly.
Not now.
Not ever. She didn't understand the words, but she understood him. And from that moment on, Ethan knew something had changed. He wasn't just protecting her. He was her shield, her guardian, her family. The human, Rylan, walked deeper into the alien camp. The air grew heavy. The guards watched him with cold eyes, but no one stopped him. They thought he would finally understand the truth about the beast. He did, but not the truth they expected. Panel 1. The Hidden Cage. He found a rusted metal door behind the main tents. Soft, weak breathing came from inside. He pushed the door open. The beast, Kara, lay chained to the floor, thinner than ever, her scales dull and cracked. She did not roar. She did not threaten. She just lifted her head with tired, sad eyes. Rylan felt his chest tighten. "Who did this to you?" Panel 2. The guards laugh. Two guards behind him laughed. This creature? Dangerous?
No.
She was only dangerous when she tried to escape. Another kicked the door. She was protecting her cub when we caught her. The cub died anyway. Rylan froze. A mother. She had been a mother, not a monster. Panel 3. Kara tries to crawl. Kara dragged herself forward, her chains scraping the floor. Her claws trembled. She wasn't moving to attack. She was trying to reach him, because she remembered his kindness. Rylan knelt instantly. "Easy. I'm here." Her forehead gently touched his palm. Panel 4. The Truth Burns. Rylan stood up, fury rising. You starved her, tortured her, called her dangerous. For what? The guard shrugged. She was marked for death. We just made the job easier. Rylan clenched his jaw. He had never wanted to fight anyone. But now he wanted to break every chain in this place. Panel 5, a promise. Rylan returned to Kara's side. Her breathing was shallow. She trusted he would help. I won't leave you, he whispered. Not again. Her eyes closed, but not in fear. In relief. Panel 6, the human stands alone. Outside, more guards approached. Rylan stepped out of the cage, standing between them and her. He wasn't strong. He wasn't armed. He wasn't trained. But he had one thing they didn't. A reason to fight. The morning sun broke across the alien horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Ethan sat beside Lyra, watching her stretch and yawn after a restless night. The fire from yesterday had died down, leaving small embers glowing faintly. The forest around them was quiet, alive with the faint sounds of alien birds and insects, but peaceful compared to the dangers they had faced before. Lyra looked up at Ethan with wide violet eyes. She had eaten slowly, carefully, making sure he had enough food as well. It was strange to see such a small child so cautious, so aware of another's needs. But she had learned quickly. He had taught her more than survival. He had shown her care, protection, and trust. Today, Ethan whispered softly, we find a safer place. Somewhere we can stay, at least for now. Lyra nodded, gripping his sleeve. She did not speak the human words, but her trust spoke louder than anything she could say. They walked through the forest, Ethan carrying her most of the way, keeping close to the shadows of the tall blue trees. At times, Lyra pointed out small plants and roots she recognized. Ethan nodded and followed her lead, letting her guide him. It was strange, this partnership. A human learning survival tips from a 5-year-old alien child. But it worked. By midday, they reached a gentle hill overlooking a small valley. The land was flat, with soft grass that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. A stream ran through the middle, glinting like liquid silver. Ethan knelt and set Lyra down. She took tentative steps, exploring the new place. Her eyes lit up with curiosity, and for the first time since he found her, she smiled freely. Ethan watched her carefully, his heart swelling. She was safe here, at least for now. But he knew the world beyond the valley was still dangerous. Alien authorities, wild creatures, and unpredictable storms waited. He could not let his guard down, not for a second. Lyra, he said gently, crouching to meet her gaze, we're safe for now. This is our place. She tilted her head, staring at him for a long moment. Then she took a small, trembling step closer. She reached out her hand and placed it on his chest, just above his heart. Ethan's throat tightened. He could feel her pulse against his own. Her trust was complete, fragile but unwavering. He had promised her safety, and he intended to keep that promise, no matter what it took. Lyra spoke in her soft alien language, a string of musical syllables Ethan did not understand. He tilted his head, listening carefully. She repeated the words slowly, looking at him, her violet eyes shining. I think she's saying it, Ethan whispered. She's calling me family. The word felt heavy in the air, though it was not a word he fully understood. Yet he knew the meaning. Not parent, not guardian, family. The bond that went beyond species, beyond words. The bond that connected hearts. Ethan reached out and placed a hand gently over hers. Family, he said softly, letting the words settle between them. She smiled and pressed her forehead against his chest, a gesture of absolute trust. The rest of the day passed quietly. They explored the valley together. Lyra pointed out safe spots near the stream, places with good food plants and dry areas for shelter. Ethan followed her guidance, taking careful notes in his mind. He built a small structure of rocks and fallen branches, creating a safe area for her to rest. Each small gesture, each act of care, strengthened the bond they shared. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery reds and purples, Ethan and Lyra sat on a smooth rock near the stream. He handed her a small piece of food, which she took slowly, savoring it. Then she offered him a tiny piece in return. He smiled, shaking his head gently. "You don't have to share everything," he said. She only looked at him with quiet understanding, then nuzzled against his side. For the first time since he had found her beside her mother, Ethan felt hope. Real hope. Lyra's eyes, once filled with fear and grief, now shone with curiosity, trust, and happiness. She was beginning to heal. She had begun to see him not just as a protector, but as someone who belonged in her life, someone she could call family. Night fell over the valley. Stars appeared in the alien sky, green and pink and shining white, like scattered jewels. Ethan built a small fire, and Lyra curled up next to him, the blanket wrapped snugly around her shoulders. She looked up at him and whispered another string of words, soft and musical. Ethan smiled. "I understand," he said quietly. "You're happy. And I am too." The firelight reflected in her violet eyes as she drifted to sleep. Ethan kept watch, as he had for every night since finding her, feeling a quiet determination rise in his chest. No matter what dangers lay ahead, no matter what challenges the alien world would throw at them, he would protect her. Because she had chosen him. Because she had called him family. And in that moment, on a strange and dangerous planet, Ethan realized something extraordinary. Family was not defined by species, by blood, or by law. Family was defined by trust, by care, and by the willingness to stand by each other, even when the world seemed impossible. And Ethan knew, with unwavering certainty, that he and Lyra had found that bond. Together, they would face the universe. Together, they would survive. Together, they were family.